Yeah. So why SDGs? Why Sustainable Development Goals? Those were basically came in place in 2015. United Nations and a lot of countries signed in, and through SDGs, actually, we started looking at businesses not as problem but as part of solutions. So SDG definitely played a great role into that psychology. But looking at the current situation, I mean, last year when the pandemic hit, we saw how businesses faced so many challenges to be able to run and thrive. And now on, we have all these challenges for businesses around the world where inequality, unrest, it could be political unrest, climate change, poverty, as well as added challenge for businesses, which is millennial consumers, and they are more aware, they are more demanding in terms of ESG. And not just that, but also the investors are more careful thanks to sustainable finance development, that investors around the world are now looking into investing into more sustainable business. And that's why basically it is necessary for businesses to start their sustainability journey, and SDG could be one of the framework. Now, this is very interesting to understand that SDGs can generate $12 trillion a year for a business, for the companies and businesses around the world, and it could create around 380 million jobs. So definitely SDGs can work well if businesses around the world want to embed sustainability into their business. So let's look at the current situation of SDG reporting. Looking at the data by KPMG, now more and more companies are opting for SDG reporting. The graph is exponentially rising. Around 40% companies around the world are acknowledging financial risk and climate change in their reporting. And they are basically committing to reduce their carbon emission. Though majority of companies are associating themselves with SDG, SDG reporting is still unbalanced and disconnected. Most of the SDGs which are popular in reporting are related to climate change, responsible consumption, and economic growth. But the SDGs which are linked to protecting biodiversity are least favorable by the businesses, are least reported SDGs. Let's look at the next analysis, which is by MSCI. So MSCI did the analysis based on the companies listed in MSCI index. So around 8,550 companies were analyzed. And out of them, very interestingly, only 0.2% companies are most aligned to SDGs. Then around, in total, you could say 38% companies are aligned fairly, but rest of the almost 60% of the companies are either not aligned properly, not adequately, or even misaligned. So this is the current status of SDG reporting. If you look at this particular analysis by MSCI, you could see that some of the SDGs are most reported, which are SDG 13, 7, and 12. Climate mitigation and energy solutions and sustainable consumption and production. I know that it's too tiny here for you to read, but they are most reported, but also they are least aligned or misaligned. So that's why it's very important to understand SDG reporting correctly and perform it in a proper way. So what are the SDG disclosure practices? Generally speaking, it starts with understanding SDGs. Now, we all know, even the kids nowadays know that there are 17 SDGs, but very few people actually go in depth and try and understand that there are 169 goals. And some of these goals, we definitely, if we don't study properly, we might get confused. I would come to those points later on, but this should be the first step. This particular document by United Nations and GRI together, along with PwC, an analysis of goals and targets, could be a great document for anyone who wants to understand SDGs properly, especially these 169 goals and the breakdown of it. And this should be the first step for anyone who is interested in SDG reporting for their business, or even thinking about aligning their business with SDGs. The second step should be defining priority. SDG mapping or prioritizing SDGs, setting up goals, KPIs, integrating SDG properly into the business, and reporting and communication. This is a very popular figure you could see from SDG Compass, which is one of the favorite tools for SDG reporting. Now, when it comes to SDG mapping and SDG prioritizing, it's very, very important that businesses should go beyond business as usual. So what happens, generally speaking, we saw the statistic by MSCI and KPMG that not many businesses are aligning correctly with SDGs, is because whatever their existing good actions, sometimes naturally some good actions businesses have without taking any efforts. It's basically embedded into their business model. And whatever their existing or business as usual good practices, they end up highlighting only those into SDGs. But that shouldn't be the case, because SDG reporting is not just about showing off for companies that how good job we are doing. It's actually making a goal so that whatever the existing business as usual is, if they can try to adopt SDGs in such a way that they can actually start their sustainable business journey, or they can change their business model to make it more sustainable business model. So that's why it's important for companies to combine both current SDG priorities, as well as whatever basically they are doing good, as well as what could be their goal, where they could target themselves those SDGs. So basically, some of the SDGs, they might not be complying in a way, complying might not be the right word because it's not really mandatory, but they might not be ticking box for those SDGs at the moment. Their business model do not allow them to tick box authentically, but they could have that goal in place so that their business would actually achieve those sustainable targets. And that should be the most important thing. So SDG prioritizing, but not as per business as usual. What is the basic idea behind SDG reporting? So apart from whatever current good deeds companies are doing, they should be looking at basically value creating. So through SDGs, if they could create goals to increase their positive impact and minimize their negative impact. This is the figure you could see very clearly. So through raw material, through suppliers, through logistics, inbound distribution, company operations, product use, product end life. This is just one example for a particular company, which could be a manufacturing company. But it's important that companies should prioritize SDGs based on value creation, not just based on the idea of reporting whatever they are doing good, business as usual. Now it is important to understand our first step. I'm going back to the first step a little bit, that it's important to understand SDGs clearly and all the 169 goals clearly, so that it will help an organization to actually prioritize SDGs correctly. So one of the very popular example I can give you here is, for example, a company is using some of their profit money to feed kids in the school. Let's say maybe underdeveloped countries or developing countries. And they feel because they are actually helping the school to feed the kids, it could come under SDG goal, which is education. Let me tell you the exact one. So quality education, SDG 4. But that's not the case. When they are helping the kids, underprivileged kids, to get nourished properly, it should target under SDG 2, which is zero hunger. So that's why it's important to understand all the separate or sub goals under all the SDGs. And then depending on that, companies should prioritize or map SDG goals for their business. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so how do companies, once they decide that, okay, these might be the SDGs where we have impact or we could create an influence, but is this enough to just choose the SDGs? No, not. It's not enough, because companies need to clearly specify their KPIs, and how they could do that. They could do that either through materiality assessment. So what is the materiality assessment? Basically, where through this process, where they identify, refine, and assess numerous potential environmental, social, and governance issues which could affect their business or their stakeholders. So this is a very popular term, materiality assessment, but also this also connects to checking the risk and opportunities for the business. Do you remember at the start I mentioned that SDGs can create a 12 trillion market, and that is actually the opportunity for businesses. So through materiality assessment and through risk opportunities, if businesses could find proper KPIs where they would also create value and basically create their share in that market, the future market, $12 trillion, but also they could decrease their impact, negative impact on the environment and society, and increase the value addition, value creation. So this is a very good figure to try and understand that. So basically, business activities has to be aligned as per the SDGs, because SDGs is not just about the reporting, they have to also embed that. So SDGs, once they create the goal of SDGs, consider the SDGs which are business as usual already, which they are ticking the box, as well as extra SDGs where they see their business growing, the relevant SDG, and then that's how they will create their KPI. So after this, the step will be SDG frameworks and tools. So I'm just going to show you some of the popular frameworks and tools for SDG reporting. So SDG reporting tool, which is created, SDG Impact, the most popular tool, SDG Mapping document. Also, SDG Compass, where you could find a lot of tools and the standards which can help you through aligning your business with particular SDG or even sub goals. And IRIS Plus are some of the popular tools, as well as SDGHub.com is another tool. So these could be the SDG framework or tools. And honestly, there are so many SDG tools coming up as this is getting more and more popular. So more and more tools you could find online, or if you collaborate with other businesses or organizations, that is also a great way trying to understand more SDG tools and frameworks. The next slide is SDG Reporting Framework. So how do people, companies or organizations actually report SDG? So most popular way of reporting SDG is non-financial reporting, though some of the companies do include SDG into their financial reporting. Obviously, SDGs are difficult to measure in a way because these are not mandatory standards, and we are still, if you look at the market, we are still developing the tools and the framework to measure the performance of SDG. But the best way of having SDG report in place is integrated reporting, where you have SDG reporting included in non-financial and financial reporting. Now, these are some of the reporting frameworks which are popular. GRI, ISO, UN Global Compact, CDP. But out of these, obviously, GRI are at the top in terms of integrating SDG into the reporting. And because GRI and UN have recently developed the framework to, so GRI is definitely more compatible in terms of helping SDG reporting for businesses. Now let's look at the challenges of SDG reporting. So one of the biggest challenge for SDG reporting is SDG report quality. So in terms of that, first thing we need to understand that even though GRI is being more compatible in terms of reporting SDGs, GRI standards are not basically designed to report SDGs. And so that's why there is definitely a gap, or we do not really have a proper standard or framework which is specially created for SDG, and companies are effectively using it and established already. So definitely this is a biggest gap. As well as many companies, like I mentioned earlier in the analysis by MSCI and KPMG, that many companies are getting confused between aligning to right and relevant SDG. That is another challenge, and that affects the SDG reporting quality. Another thing is authentically reporting SDG progress is the challenge for SDG reporting quality, because when we looked at what is the ideal scenario for companies, they should report the SDGs which they are already aligning, and they should also report which they want to align in future and want to work towards it. For that particular ideal scenario, companies should be able to transparently report that we are not doing up to the mark job as of now, but this is our plan and we can go ahead with that. But how many companies actually authentically report their positive and negative achievements, or their setbacks, negative, not achievement, but the setback. So this is one of the things where companies should transparently report and authentically report. We are going to discuss about that more in the next slide. Now, measuring the impact of SDG reporting or SDG performance for the companies is one of the toughest challenge for SDGs, because like I mentioned, we are still having a lot of challenges in terms of, because it's not a mandatory framework and it is more of voluntary reporting. So definitely companies around the world are facing the biggest challenge in how to measure their own impact to show that how much they are aligned with this particular SDG. But here are some of the tools. There are a lot of tools coming up in the market. SDG Reporting Score, which is a great SRS, great tool, which is getting developed. And another one is SDG Dashboard, where you could see the physical data collection and through surveys and visual kind of representation of once the company get on board with the SDG dashboard. So these could be the tools, and we definitely need more and more tools. This is definitely a great gap in market where businesses could come up and start some more performance measurement tools for SDGs, dedicated to SDGs. Now going back to the next one, which is SDG washing, or also very commonly known as rainbow washing. As you could see that SDGs are all colorful, and that's why the rainbow washing term came in. So SDG washing is definitely, it's basically greenwashing, but using the SDG reporting. And this is where what we saw was misaligned or severely misaligned companies in the analysis. This is what they end up doing, sometimes without knowing. Not always purposely companies would do it, but it all links up to our step number one, understanding SDGs correctly, and also they need to have the purpose in place. Now we need to very much understand that SDG reporting is not a tool of communication, because many times companies feel that they could just create SDG report, create just a framework or ticking boxes for whatever they are already doing good without taking any further efforts, and they could just use it for communication marketing purposes. Now, SDG reporting is not definitely a communication tool, and if a company is doing that, they are definitely called as SDG, they are following the practice of SDG washing. So this is very important to understand. Sometimes unknowingly companies end up doing SDG washing, and how is that? So one thing which is very important to understand, that SDGs are interlinked. So you see no poverty, zero hunger, but they are interlinked. So all of these 17 SDGs are interlinked. And if companies do not understand this interlinking, they fail to report properly. So one example, for example, there is a solar panel manufacturing company, and they feel that they are ticking boxes with the SDGs, let's say clean energy or sustainable cities or communities, and responsible consumption, let's say. But do they really, because it won't be very correct, because when the solar manufacturing company is manufacturing solar panels, there is always waste associated with it. There is always some kind of pollution associated with it. And then they will affect, let's say, SDG 15, life on land. They will affect negatively. They will impact that SDG negatively, or they could also impact SDG 14 negatively. Even the responsible consumption, they might impact negatively at certain sub category level. So the company needs to understand very thoroughly when they are claiming that they are actually aligning with particular SDG. They should also come forward and open themselves up and accept that through aligning one particular SDG, they might not be aligning with another SDG, and they should accept that, and they should work towards aligning with other SDG as well, or at least reducing their impact, negative impact, with another SDG. So that is another thing where unknowingly companies do greenwashing in their SDG reporting. Another one would be cherry picking SDG. Again, this is again a very popular term, but it again goes back to the same topic where companies do cherry pick only convenient SDGs, and they shouldn't be doing that at all. Performance could be one of a way. Right now, we cannot entirely say that if a company is not showing their performance, they are doing SDG washing, because very few companies around the earth are actually showing their SDG performance in their report, and some of them are even aligning properly but not showing performance. So this is kind of an awareness which needs to be done in the business community, that companies also should show their performance with their SDG reporting. But one of the most important thing here is companies, once they start doing SDG washing, they definitely are affecting their own credibility, and that shouldn't be happening. So it shouldn't be conveniently for the communication and marketing purpose. So is SDG reporting enough for a business? Obviously, SDG reporting will not be enough for any businesses if they are actually showing their SDG, accepting all their positive and negative impacts, transparently reporting through integrated reporting, which is financial, non-financial, also showing their performance of SDG, then it might be adequate in a way, just as it's on its own, just aligned with SDG reporting. But ideally, it should be SDG reporting always combined with other frameworks. It could be science-based targets, or it could be another frameworks, and where companies could actually create their own bespoke sustainability framework, where they will also align with SDGs and other frameworks, and they could create a more kind of holistic sustainability reporting and sustainability performance of their company. So we should not forget that final goal of sustainability reporting or SDG reporting should be creating value for positive impact. And that should be always a goal. Also, companies should include all their departments into their sustainability work or sustainability reporting. It could be right from the assessment up to the final reporting through, embedded process. They should include all the other departments as well. It should not be just one sustainability department or few sustainability professionals, or it's not ideal if they outsource the entire work. So these are some of the things we looked at, and I hope you find it helpful. So just giving you a brief about me, I basically work as a sustainability consultant, and here is the website if you want to reach out to me, AK Sustainability Advisory. Please log on to our website, Sustainability Tribe. It's basically for social awareness, where you could find a lot of resource on how individuals can take actions, because I have seen this. I was lucky enough to see in my career both sides of it, which is working with businesses, and then from the top, from bottom to top, which is creating the consumer movement. And I strongly believe that if at work, if we might find challenges embedding sustainability, or having the performance in a company, because it takes time, but at least individually we all can contribute positively, and we could create that push from bottom up for our organizations, for our business, governments as well, to have that sustainability movement going on.